to order for invocation and a moment of silence for the Bailing family. We lost a teacher at JFK. Mrs. Bailing was a great teacher in our school system. Her son, I guess, is a teacher also. So it's a moment of silence for the Bailing family for their loss. Thank you. Number 3, roll call, please.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mr. Salazar?
Here.
Mr. Rutledge?
Here.
Mrs. Costa?
Here.
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Hall?
Here.
Mrs. Thurston?
Here.
Mr. Ryder?
Here.
Chairman Krusell?
Here. Thank you all for making a nine of us being present. Number 4, update on school reopening. Mr. Drezick, please.
Mr. Chairman, this time I'm going to switch the screen over. Ready to go?
I'm ready when you are.
Mr. Barras is going to put what I hope to be a brief presentation on the screen. And again, nothing's brief these days. Okay, so today is August 11th, and as I shared with some of the board members, we're getting pretty close to September 8th as the board changed this first day of school. So we're at a point where we need to start making a decision as to what our reopening is going to look like. From a public health perspective, nothing has changed from direction that I'm receiving from the state with regards to opening in person, opening under a hybrid model, or opening fully remotely. I'll get into that a little bit more in details in a moment. You'll notice that this is still stamped draft. Everything's going to remain a draft until we're actually back in school because the information is changing hourly. As you can imagine, I'm sure some of you have heard that there's been changes to the NCAA with regards to football. And just as we thought we were kind of in coordination with a lot of us in the area, more and more districts and neighbors to our north are choosing to go remotely. But at this point, I think it's prudent that we as a district move forward so that parents have an opportunity to plan, so students can have an opportunity to plan, and for our staff to have an opportunity to plan for what our reopening is going to look like. This is just a reminder from our previous survey, which we asked parents who were going to return to school. Now, at the time that we sent this survey, the return to school was a full 5-day option. And you notice we had 78% of our parents saying they intended to send their children to school. I haven't sent another survey out, and as I said in the last meeting, every time we're about to send a new survey out, we get new information. My intention is to send a new survey out to parents tomorrow, but I want to be fair to parents, and I want to be fair to staff, I want to be fair to kids, that if I'm going to ask you if you intend to come back to school, it's only fair that I tell you what I think school is going to look like, and that's really the purpose of this meeting this evening. Those numbers are also subject to change based upon what happens later on tonight. I'm stuck. So the first question is, what options do we have? Now we have, as I stated earlier, 5 days a week. That's still an option for the district to consider. I'll get into a little bit more about discussions I've had with colleagues throughout the state. But one of the things that's become abundantly clear, and one of the things that I'm hoping to avoid, and I hope the board would agree, is that we make this decision once. And my fear is that if we make a decision to cram all of our kids back on the first day of school, all 5,200 kids that will be coming back to our schools, that it increases the probability that we're going to have to shut down at some point. And what I'm hoping to avoid is seesawing back and forth with, we're open today, we have to shut down. And what we're seeing throughout the country is schools that are doing a full-fledged reopening are finding that they're having to shut down for periods of time. I'm hoping to avoid it. And what we're also finding as we're coming through with these plans is that going 5 days a week, there's significant hurdles for all of us to entail in order to make that happen. But that's still an option. The hybrid, as I explained during the last meeting, we are permitted to pick a hybrid plan by state guidelines now. The original time when I had to submit the plan to the state, a hybrid wasn't an option. It was 5 days, all kids in school only. But shortly after that plan was due, as you know, the governor changed his mind and decided that he would give some local control or flexibility to districts. So we as a community have the right to go to a hybrid plan if we choose. We also have the right to do a phase-in plan. And I've heard a lot of communication about this through people reaching out to me about what if we were to phase kids in. We are permitted to phase students in if we choose. However, people may not understand is we would face a few issues regarding, particularly around equity and planning for families, because not every student would be coming back on a guaranteed schedule. The other caveat to a phase-in approach is in order for it to be approved by the state, we would need to guarantee a full in-person return date by a specific date. So if we decided as a community that we wanted to phase kids in, like for instance, we're just going to bring kindergartners back in for the first week. And one of the things we talked about was phasing kids in at different levels. So kindergarten, maybe third grade, maybe fifth grade, just in transition. Well, that does create some equity issues because every student is not going to have the same opportunity. It's going to create a significant burden for families who have to plan, because if your student's in kindergarten and they're able to return to school, it's great. They get the building to themselves. But if you have more than one kid and they're on a different schedule, you may have to be home anyway with your other child. And more importantly, what the commissioner was very clear with superintendents on one of our last calls were, they would support a phased-in model, but we would need to guarantee a full in-person date, meaning that we would have to put in writing to the state that by September 20th or October 1st, all students would return. And that's kind of counterproductive of where we are right now, which I'll get into in a moment. And lastly, the option of going fully remote. We can choose this option if the board were to decide to do that. However, if we do have to petition the State Department of Education and the Department of Public Health to get their permission. Permission is not guaranteed. And the irony is, for our last conversation, is that hearing would actually take place in person, which is kind of ironic. But we would essentially have to justify to the State Department of Ed and to the Department of Public Health why remote option or no in-person learning is available for our students in Enfield. I don't think we have a strong case for that right now based on public health information. However, that is an option if we wanted to go down that road. Just to put in perspective what folks in the Hartford area are doing. We all conducted a survey internally amongst our Hartford area superintendents group. Of the 29 respondents, 27 in the Hartford area are going to return under some form of a hybrid model. There are 2 that haven't officially responded yet, but I do know what they're doing, and they're going to line up essentially with where we are. I am not aware of any district in our area returning to a full 5 days a week of learning. There are some creative plans for a hybrid model that some students may go 5 days a week, but as far as back to normal, everybody come back to school, I am not aware of any district in our area that's actually doing that. As I said, most of our neighboring districts in their hybrid plans are using Wednesday as a remote day. Why is that important? A lot of times we think we have to worry about ourselves and not what everyone else is doing. I understand that. However, we also have to realize that a lot of our staff members teach in Enfield or work in Enfield, but live in surrounding communities. And if we don't try to align, if we were to go with a plan where there was a remote day, align best with our neighboring communities, we could face staffing issues, because if a teacher is teaching in Enfield and they have Wednesdays as a remote day, but their child has Friday as a remote day, all of a sudden that teacher has the same daycare issues that our families in Enfield are facing. Our teachers aren't immune to that, or our staff members aren't immune to that with their own children. So the best we can to align with our neighboring districts is what we try to achieve with this plan. Again, it's important because we have staffing issues. We can also have transportation issues because a lot of we have students coming from other districts. So making sure that we're aligning as best as possible so that we don't end up having any of these issues that we have to overcome. Our plan attempts to address this the best we can. I should have started by saying none of this is perfect. And I've tried to reiterate that every time I've had a meeting and sat at this chair and told you this. No one ever wanted, at least I can speak for myself, at no point in my life did I ever aspire to sit here and say, let's come up with a hybrid plan to bring kids back on a temporary basis. No one wants to do any of this. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. So our plan is going to attempt to address this as best we could, but I thought it was important for people at home, in particular, to know that most districts in the area are opening on a similar plan. You also hear a lot about alphabetical split. So I want to just explain where that concept came from. It's about density in our buildings. And if we were to engage in a hybrid plan, the purpose of that is to limit the amount of people that are actually in the buildings to enhance social distancing measures. In order to accomplish that, we would need to split students up into cohorts in some capacity. There's a lot of discussion about whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, or a Tuesday, Thursday. I'll get into that in a moment. But I thought it's important for the people at home and as well as for the board members to understand that we have to account for 5,231 students that could be returning to the Enfield Public Schools. Students with the last name beginning A through K, we have 2,615 students. The students with the last name beginning L through N. It's L through Z. We made the same mistake twice. I apologize to those watching at home. I had M written on my thing and I wrote it wrong. It's Z. It's 22,616. So originally, when we made our proposal for a hybrid model, I had initially said we would do A through L, but as we dug into the numbers a little bit, we have to be consistent district-wide to make sure that we're splitting kids up and creating as much of an equal balance on the different days as possible. And as you can see, just shifting from L to K is almost identical with the amount of kids that would be in those cohorts. Also have to take into consideration, this is important for families to hear, that we are going to be flexible. We recognize that we may have children living in the same household with different last names. We're not going to make you go to school on two different cohorts. Those are all things that we're taking into consideration as we start rolling this plan out. We are going to try to be as consistent as we can as possible to help this lift the burden as much as we can for families. Another reason why the alphabetical split works better than other suggestions that I've heard is because we may have families with children in different levels of school. So we may have families who have students that are at the high school and at an elementary school. And for families who may have to go back to work, they may be relying upon their older child as daycare for their younger student while they're doing remote learning. So what I didn't want to do is create a model where our high school kids were off a different schedule than all of our other kids, because that could cause more confusion for families and more families trying to scramble to find coverage. So we're trying to make this as family friendly and as student friendly and as staff friendly as we can. Is there a way I can get my face off here so I can see the whole thing? There we go. Sorry about that. So if this is approved this evening, the Enfield Public Schools will reopen for K-12 students on Tuesday, September 8th, 2020 through Friday, October 16th, 2020 with a hybrid model. I want to stress the importance of the top line. This is the plan for K-12. I will address pre-K in a moment, but right now I'm only discussing kindergarten through 12th grade. The hybrid model will include a structure where students with the last name beginning with A through K will attend in-person classes on Mondays and Tuesdays while participating in remote learning on Thursdays and Fridays. Students with the last name beginning L through Z will attend in-person classes on Thursdays and Fridays while participating in remote learning on Mondays and Tuesdays. All students and staff will participate in remote learning on Wednesdays in order for the district to conduct a deep cleaning of all of our buildings. I want to go back because I've had some suggestions about splitting students up differently as opposed to cohorting on Mondays and Tuesdays. And I know the effect of that could be that if you're in cohort A, you go to school Monday and Tuesday, but then essentially you're off for a longer period of time before you get some in-person class time again. The challenge with splitting that hypothetically with, say, Monday and Thursday and a Tuesday and Friday schedule contradicts our ability to clean the buildings appropriately, because we're bringing in different cohorts of kids before we allow our buildings and ground staff to get in and do a deep clean on those Wednesdays. And we're essentially contaminating the building every day before we have the opportunity to do a deep clean. So working in the cohorts and keeping them together, although not ideal, from a health and safety perspective, in my opinion, that's the best alternative for us to look at. For those days where you're remote learning, it will consist of asynchronous learning and a blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning, because teachers are still going to be required to conduct in-person classes for those students who are in attendance each day, obviously with the exception of Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, when the entire district will be participating in remote learning, that will be a more structured synchronous learning environment, and I'll get into it a little bit more details in a moment. But for parents who are wondering, what are my children going to do on the days they're not in school? It will be a blend. There will be some times where they'll have the ability to actually see their teacher just like they were in school, but obviously doing it from the comforts of their home. But it's not going to be a consistent, rigorous schedule on those Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday, depending upon each cohort, because the teachers are still teaching live classes with kids in there. As an example, at some point during the day, teachers may need to take a mask break and bring their kids outside. I'm not going to ask teachers to bring their phone and videotape themselves so that the students at home will have an opportunity to watch the kids go outside. That will be a time when students at home will either have an assignment to do or be given a break themselves. But more specifics we'll talk about as we go down the what I said earlier was my recommendation in this proposal to the board is that we commit to this model until October 16th. And I say that for a number of reasons. As I kind of stated earlier, I don't think it's in anyone's best interest if we continuously have to alter this decision on, say, a weekly basis. And one of the things that concerns me about going full day, 5 days a week, is that increases the likelihood that if there is any confirmed cases in town, because we don't have clear direction from the state yet on what closing procedures are, we may be forced to close down. And I don't think anyone wants to start and stop and start and stop. So trying to find that balance of a plan that works, that meets the needs of kids right now as best we can and families, but also giving us some flexibility to make sure that we can enact on this. From a planning perspective, if we commit to a date this evening, this gives everyone, our families, our teachers, and our kids, the ability to know, okay, this is what we're going to be doing up until a certain date. And we don't have to worry about doing this every week or every 2 weeks. Everyone can remember back to the spring when we were shut down by the state, it was done in 2-week increments. And I think the anxiety of the 2-week decision actually contributed more toward the detriment of what we were doing, as opposed to just saying, we're going to be out a month or we're going to be out the remainder of the year. That constant anxiety of what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen next week, I think it's in everyone's best interest to pick a date that's reasonable where we can ultimately reassess. By picking October 16th, it's a Friday, we adopt this plan tonight. That gives the Enfield Public Schools nearly 8 weeks to monitor public health data to determine if anything's going to change. Right now, the reality is we still don't know if we're doing any of this. And that's not going to be a decision made by the 9 of you or by me. That's going to be a decision that's driven by public health data. We do need time. I'm sure you all hear the same reports that I hear. We anticipated getting worse. We anticipate another wave coming through. Well, no one really knows. If I've learned anything from this process is no one really understands what's happening. So although we're being told to prepare for our health data to change, by committing to October 16th, at a minimum, that gives us 8 weeks to gather public health data to determine what we're going to do continuously down the road. That also gives us experience. I can't stress enough. We have never done this before. We've never done anything but open up normally, and I can't wait till that day comes. However, we had to do distance learning overnight back in the spring. Going to a hybrid plan sounds great on paper, but when you actually have to institute it, there are challenges that we just don't know right now because we haven't experienced them. By picking a date of October 16th, that gives us the opportunity of having nearly 5 weeks of kids in school so that we'll be in a better position to make any necessary adjustments that we need to make and ensure that we're making this experience as best as possible for students, our families, and our staff. If the board were to choose October 16th, as I'm recommending, that also gives families who are opting out some clarity. I've had some questions from parents to say, I don't want to send my child back to school right now, but what are my choices as far as changing my mind? The way that the guidelines are written, and it was reconfirmed again by the commissioner, was that the local board or superintendent can choose a date for families who are opting out, as long as it's reasonable, so that families don't have the expectation that they can change their mind in a 24-hour period and come to school after they've already opted out. As an example, September 8th comes, we institute a plan, a family, rightfully so. I don't begrudge anyone who makes this decision. I understand how hard this decision is. I'm making it in my home too. But if a parent decides on September 8th, you know what, I'm not sending my child to school. At September 15th, after a week of experience in talking to friends and your children talking to their friends, people may come to the realization that, you know what, it's not as scary as I thought it was. I'd like my child to go. The reality is, if someone calls me on the 15th, we're not ready for them. We're planning for the amount of students who are being told, within the next week, how many people are actually coming. Keeping an opt-out date or keeping this phase of a hybrid model and cutting it off at October 16th, we would be asking families, if you are going to opt out, you would be committing to at least that date as well. We need to reassess. If we were to adopt this plan this evening, or you were to adopt this plan this evening, my commitment to you and to the entire community is we're going to constantly be reassessing this anyway, but by October 2nd, which is a Friday, we will come back to the board and give an update as far as the health data that we've gathered in the time since this plan was enacted and the experience we're having since this plan has been enacted, and present a recommendation to the board on what we would need to do for October 19th, which is the following Monday. I don't know what that's going to look like. By October, we might be fully remote. We may be fully back. We don't know at this point. The magic in those dates are we would need to make our next decision on it by October 2nd, because to be fair to families and to staff, we have to give people some lead time before we go and change our plan. So the October 2nd date was picked ideally so that way we can at least inform the community that in 2 weeks we're going to be either continuing what we're doing or switching to another plan. Our special needs students. So although a majority of our K-12 students will be participating in in-person learning 2 days a week, assuming this is adopted, there will be a few exceptions. And our students with special needs who attend designated programs will be permitted to attend school 4 days a week if parents wish. So our programs that are currently designed in a cohort model and already have low enrollment, all by design, will fall into this category. So it's not every child who has an IEP, it's students who are in these particular programs. So our Eagle Academy, our ECP classes, our ALP classes, our ASD classes, our ETLA program, and both our SOAR program at JFK and Enfield High School will be allowed to conduct classes 4 days a week for those parents who choose to. I do want to make it clear though, 4 days a week means Wednesday, everyone is still remote. I don't want to get in confusion for families who say, okay, that's great. My son or daughter's in that program. They're going to be in school 5 days a week. We would not be in a cohort in that program. You would be in your class, and on Wednesdays, we would still be instituting remote learning across the district. We're able to do this for these students because these programs were designed with lower enrollment numbers. These programs have already limited interaction with other classes in the building, and they're already designed with a cohort in place. So these students essentially are going to be in their own programs anyway without interacting much with the rest of the building. So we are in a position to offer for those who are willing to go to those classes 4 days a week. But since the beginning of this pandemic, one thing that we've realized that our most vulnerable students were going to be the most adversely affected by remote learning. Remote learning does not line up for our students who have the most significant needs. So we owe it to them to do whatever possible to give these students the programming that they require, but more importantly, that they deserve. And we're hoping that this is a good thing. For those families who are temporarily choosing not to participate, parents still have the option to opt out of in-person classes. Those parents who decide to opt out, and there's a difference between opting out and homeschooling. So right now, I'm just talking about the parents who are choosing to not participate in this hybrid model, but are remaining as Enfield Public School students and families. You are just simply opting out, and you're opting for a full virtual platform for your children through October 16th. For those parents, your programming will include a blend of synchronous and asynchronous instruction on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Just as the students who are returning for those 2 days, Your student obviously wouldn't be coming into the building on those 4 days. So you will have a blend of real-time instruction as well as some asynchronous instruction, which could be assignments, all done electronically as well. The reason that we can't do 100% synchronous instruction for those students is the same reason that I mentioned earlier. Our teachers are still going to have students in their classroom, albeit the classes will be smaller. I don't believe it's fair to ask teachers to conduct real-time lessons for both kids who are in class and kids who are working remotely concurrently, because there are other instructions that they have to do. I still believe it's in the best interest of students to have some synchronous learning every day if possible, and that's what we're able to achieve. But I don't want parents who are going to opt out or think they're going to turn on their child's iPad and from 9 to 3, it's going to be continuous learning. That's not going to be the case on those days, with the exception of Wednesdays, but that goes for everyone. There will be a structured synchronous schedule offered on Wednesdays, as the entire district will be on a remote instruction day. So that teacher's responsibility for that one day on Wednesdays will be working with iPads. While I'm on the subject of iPads, I can't see, but hopefully you can see me. Higher. This is what the iPad looks like. They are in. I've gotten a lot of questions on when are we getting them. This is what the iPad looks like with the case. The cases are not in yet, and I'm hesitant to distribute iPads in this form because the likelihood that something may happen to them without a protective cover increases. And as you can tell by the iPad covers we have, they're very sturdy and durable. We are working night and day with our vendor to get these in. It is still our intention to get the iPads in kids' hands before they come back to school, but it may come to a point where we have to make a decision to distribute without the cases, but we're hopeful that's not the case. That was a side note, it's not including them. But for those who are working remotely, it may include some live streaming of real-time instructions. We still want our students to have that, although they're not present in in-person classes, that FaceTime with their teachers, so that isolation piece can be addressed as best as possible, particularly for students who choose to opt out. So what is this going to look like? Starting through K through 5, our students will be in a cohort of their classroom with limited mobility throughout the day. So if your student is in classroom 10 at Henry Barnard, in all likelihood, that's where they're going to spend the vast majority of their day outside of maybe going to use the bathroom. By adopting a hybrid model, our class size initially, as I sent to the board a few weeks ago, of 18 will now decrease to approximately 9 students per classroom, because only 50% of our population will be coming in on each particular day. That allows us more options to enhance our social distancing measures. So although the guidance requires us to have 3 feet, if you recall, I said, at 18, we can achieve 3 feet. Obviously with 9, simple math would think, I don't want to say we can definitely achieve 6 feet, but we can get a lot closer to 6 feet per student station by only having half of the students in the class at a time. With the help of our buildings and grounds officials who have been fantastic, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Donald Nunes, Kenny Keto, and especially Mark Gar. I don't know if he's watching or probably mad at me for doing this. Under normal circumstances, Mark has always been our guardian angel, saving us anytime we need anything. During these times, particularly when it came to tents, Mark has been an absolute godsend for us. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Mark and all of our B&G staff. But I know Mark and I are in communication 4, 5, 6 times a day, and he never tells me no. He just tells me, let me figure it out. So I appreciate everything that Mark and our whole B&G staff have done. But with their help, along with our town building inspector and all of our fire marshals who have been outstanding and extremely supportive throughout this entire process for us, we have been able to procure tents for each of our schools. And our tents are going to be for warm weather months only. They will not have sides, they will not have heating devices, but they will allow each school an additional space so that students can go out for mask breaks, that we can possibly have outdoor lunch, and we can even conduct outdoor lessons. Now that we know that the tents have been approved, our principals are now scheduling the building to try to take advantage of as much outdoor time for the kids who are in the building, if this is approved, as possible. With regards to lunch, in order to avoid mobility for students, students are going to be required to eat lunch in their classrooms, or if the scheduling permits. We will not be using cafeterias during this phase of reopening. After school activities. There will be no school sponsored after school in-person activities. The only after school care will be through either ECDC over at Stowe or at ERFC, which is the only approved after school program in any Enfield public school facility. I say that, it pains me to say that, but the reality is if we're going to do this, our responsibility is to educate kids. And I know, and I believe strongly in educating the whole child. But our main priority is to get our kids in the building as safely as we can. To be quite frank, get everybody out of there as safely as we can, so our B&G staff can get back in the buildings when everyone's gone and clean for the next day. And if we allow after-school activities in our buildings, that kind of defeats the purpose of limiting interaction within our buildings and limiting people congregating around our buildings. So there's a common theme amongst this. And I tell this to the administrators every week, nothing's changed. Get in, get out, so we can clean and get everybody back the next day. Our specials, such as art, music, library, STEAM, computer ed, those are going to be conducted in the classrooms. So I know kids are used to going down to the library, having the library aide read to them, help them access library materials. Unfortunately, in this day and age, that's just not feasible. So we're working our schedule so that we're conducting our specials in the classrooms. Arrival and dismissal times. Adjustments are going to be made to arrival and dismissal times in order to better control the flow of students coming in and out of the buildings. We've spoken with the bus company. There's going to be different times for walkers, different times for students that are coming in on buses, different times for parents that are dropping off. All of that specific building level information and schedules are going to come from your child's building principal. I say that because if I make a unilateral announcement today about all of our schools, to be quite honest, sometimes people don't always listen. And I wouldn't probably listen either. People are going to like to hear the principal's voice or the principal's message, probably more so than mine. And they're better suited to answer building level specific questions about loops in a driveway or where dismissals are going to be, or building specific questions on scheduling. So shortly after this evening, in the coming days, you should be hearing from your child's principal. We're going to be informing staff tomorrow that this is what the plans are going to look like, assuming it's approved. And very shortly after that, we will start rolling this information with more specific out to parents. I just want to set the expectation that I'm not going to make a unilateral announcement about each individual school. I think it's better suited for people to hear directly from their child's principal. JFK. This is a double-edged sword. What is it going to look like? Well, we really don't know because it's under construction. But right now, for JFK, for grade 6 through 8 students, again, students will be in a cohort in their respective teams. So instead of being a cohort in your class, we're able to keep kids cohorted by team with limited mobility throughout the day. Now, our limitations on mobility are enhanced because of the construction project at JFK. But because we're adopting this hybrid model, we're able to make our average class size decrease by approximately 50%, which gives us more options to spread kids out better throughout the building. Again, same thing with tents. We've procured tents for all of our buildings. Now, there's a lot more kids there than there are at an elementary school, but we want to make tents available so that the administration there can plan to get kids outside as best they can. Same thing's going to go with lunch. We're not using the cafeteria. The truth is we were never using the cafeteria because the cafeteria is under construction, but students are going to be required to eat in their classrooms. After school activities is the same. There's no school-sponsored after-school activities at JFK this year. I will give a caveat because I understand JFK has sports. We're going to talk more about sports at the high school. But again, the only after-school programming right now that we can support is through ECDC or ERFC. Specials, again, is very similar at all the other levels. They will be in the students' classrooms as much as we can. There may be some opportunities for kids, but part of the concern that we have is not just having the space for kids to be in, but getting kids from one space to the next. We've all seen the video from the weekend of a high school in Georgia where kids were crammed into a hallway. We're doing everything we can to avoid that. So we're being as creative as possible to keep kids stationary for as much of the day as we can. So that way we have limit the interaction amongst other students in the building, get kids in, get kids home safely so they can come back safe tomorrow. Arrival and dismissal times, again, there's going to be adjustments district-wide. And speaking with the bus company, they panicked because the first thing they heard was there's going to be a time change at the high school. That obviously has an effect on every other level. Every other level, there will be a slight adjustment to the arrival and dismissal times. It's not going to be hours. It's going to be in chunks of minutes, maybe even 30 minutes. But we are going to have to make adjustments to the start and end time in order to get kids in and out of the building safely. I'm going to touch upon sports just briefly here. I realize JFK has sports. I haven't made a final decision on sports yet. I don't make a decision on sports when it comes to the high school. That decision is going to be made by the CIAC. Now, the CIAC put out guidance last week that they intend to have fall sports. But as most of you have probably heard, it seems like every day another group is falling. Today it was college football won't be taking place. My suspicion is at some point this week, a final decision on fall sports will be made from the CIAC. Once I know that decision, we'll make a decision about JFK sports. Now, I will tell you I'm not optimistic because I'm hearing a lot of middle schools in our area aren't going to compete in middle school sports. It's going to be a challenge to get kids as far as competition goes, going from one school to the next because they're all not in Enfield. And again, having kids congregate around the school during a time where we're trying to distance them is going to be challenging. But I'm not making a final decision on any of the sports until I hear from the CIAC. Enfield High School. What is this going to look like? For our high school students, a schedule has already been created. It's going to limit the amount of classes that students take. I'm not going to give it all away now. I'm going to allow Ms. Clark to do that, but during this phase, and it's going to be shared with the community in the coming days. Not limiting opportunities, but the schedule is going to look different. A traditional 7-period day is not going to work during a hybrid model, but the school is going to work is going to advertise that tomorrow. They're going to have meetings with staff, and then shortly after that, start advertising what that model is going to look like. However, same rules apply. By going to a hybrid model, that takes our building capacity from 1,600 to 800, which gives us a lot more opportunity to enhance our social distancing measures. We also have some tents set up for the high school. Lunch, again, is going to be a challenge. We're going to ask students to eat lunch in their classrooms because we're not going to be able to congregate in the cafeteria. If you've ever been to the high school during a lunch wave, there's 400 kids potentially in the cafeteria during any lunch wave. That's something that we just can't sustain right now. Again, this is going to be very unpopular. And I probably should have said this at the beginning. I don't want to do any of this. However, after-school activities at the high school look a lot different than they look at the primary school. I understand that. Our clubs, our music programs, our art programs, our theater programs. These are the lifeblood of what makes our school so great. Those are the things that we all take tremendous pride in, particularly at Enfield High School. There's no prouder moment than when we get to go to an event with showcasing, whether it be our art students at the art show, a music concert, one of the Lamplighters plays. I just don't have any realistic way of conducting those activities after school that would still maintain the social distancing and the guidelines that the state's requiring us to do that. So unfortunately, during this phase, my recommendation is going to be, again, athletics is separate. I don't control athletics. I control after-school activities. So for this phase, all after-school activities will be postponed unless at the high school, if there is a possibility for after-school activities to be conducted virtually, I will absolutely support that. I'm not going to make that decision until I talk to those who actually run those activities and give them the courtesy of telling me whether it can be done and whether they're interested in doing it that way. I am 100% open to it, but right now, any in-person after-school activities, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to support. I stated earlier, CIAC is going to make the final decision regarding athletics. Athletics are due to start up on the 17th, which is next week. So I'm anticipating that within the coming days, a final decision on fall sports will be made by the CIAC. There's a lot of rumors out there, guys. I'm hearing a lot of different scenarios. I would just caution everybody until you actually hear something final, either from me, from our athletic director, Corey O'Connell, or from the state, from CIAC. Don't rush to any judgments at this point. And again, same rules apply for arrival and dismissal times. We're going to have to dismiss kids a little early at the high school in order to get everybody out safe. This one is going to be the one I've been dreading to even put on the screen. But what is the Stowe Early Learning Center going to look like, our pre-K programs? To be completely transparent, we don't know right now. We do not have a concrete plan for preschool students at Stowe. It's not because of a lack of trying. It's because there's a lot of variables that go into our programming there that we have to work out before we can make a guarantee for families this is what it's going to look like. What I do know right now is that one program that's housed at Stowe is our integrated preschool program for special needs students. Those programs are required by law to take place. So that integrated preschool is going to take place. What it looks like, because right now, some of you may be aware, we have 4 rooms there and they run double sessions. So there's an AM and a PM session. One of the challenges we're coming into is when students leave in the morning, we only have a very small window to clean those classrooms before the afternoon students come in. There may not be enough time just because the drying agents aren't dry in time. So there's a lot of obstacles when it comes to the Stowe Early Learning Center with all the programs in there. And I didn't want to hold off on putting the plan out for K-12, but we're hoping by next week we'll have a plan on what the reopening for Stowe is going to be. I don't say this with any pride. This is not an endorsement. But you have to understand that right now preschool is not mandated by law, but that doesn't mean we don't have a desire to make sure that we're getting it open in some capacity. We're working on a plan right now to offer some in-person programming for our students who attend Stowe. But right now, because K through 12 is mandated by law and integrated is mandated by law, we have to have those plans in place first. There is no bigger proponent of what we do over at Stowe. Stowe is one of the, and you've heard me brag about this when we were creating the Eagle Academy. Stowe is a model for what a community early childhood center should be. We're going to do everything we can to continue that. I just can't commit to anything right at this moment. And the reason for that is what I listed below. These are all the programs that are currently housed at Stowe. We have a pre-K STEAM program. We have Smart Start classrooms. Our integrated pre-K is there. Head Start is there. We also have several Project Choice students who attend Stowe that come in from Hartford. So planning for all these unique programmings and how we're going to enhance social distancing and the reality of their 3 and 4-year-olds who are not required to wear masks right now is become challenging. But as I said, we're hoping to announce the plan for Stowe as early as next week, if possible. And I know there's a lot of parents who are going to Stowe who are not going to be happy with me right now. I'm sorry. I wish I had more concrete information, but for the reasons I stated earlier, there's a lot of unique challenges we have to overcome in order to make sure we have a good, solid plan in place. For those of you who are familiar with Stowe and you've been there, you probably noticed that that building is overcrowded during normal times. So that also enhances our inability to come up with a concrete plan right now. Social distancing. So if we were to commit to a hybrid model until October 16th, the density of students in each building will allow us to achieve greater distance between student workstations. We are going to strive to achieve 6 feet when feasible, but we can commit that no less than 3 feet between every student workstation will be attained. Obviously, with less kids in the building, the further we can spread them out. I understand that many of these decisions are not going to be popular, but our goal is pretty simple, is to give our students as much normalcy as possible during this time, while attempting to re-enter students into the schools as safely as possible. Safety is our main and will always be our main priority and highest goal. At the same time, trying to give our kids some sense of normalcy again is really what we're trying to achieve. But our goal is not changed. Safety's first. The priority for this plan is to get our students and staff in the buildings and out of the buildings as quick as possible, so that we give our buildings and ground staff as much time as they can to get in there and clean, so that we're able to come back the next day. The last thing in the world anybody out there watching wants to hear is a 5 o'clock in the morning phone call from Mr. Barassa, who's in my office right now, saying, Enfield Public Schools is closed today because we couldn't clean a building in time or because there was something contaminated. So all of this was done with trying to create not just some normalcy, but some sustainability in our plan and not have to pull the plug at any moment. This isn't going to be popular either. Visitors. This goes against what we've been advertising since I've been in this chair. But in order to safely comply with our guidelines, we have to limit visitors from our schools and not let them be permitted. Now, I understand there's going to be times parents have to bring something to a building. Kid forgets their lunch, you forget their sneakers, whatever the case may be. Protocols are going to be in place to drop off materials without coming into the school. There will be signage throughout our facilities to raise awareness around stopping the spread, make the signs accessible for students with disabilities in language that are appropriate for the school population. When it comes to visitors, I understand that there's going to be times where parents want to come in and see their kids. We're not trying to be rude. We're not trying to be disrespectful. We want you to be able to come in and see your kids. Unfortunately, under the guidance that we have to live in, we just can't safely do it. So I hope everyone understands. I never want to say you're not welcome, but in this case, visitors unfortunately are not. Transportation. If you recall when I presented the last time, it was under that low risk capacity. Well, that's where we would be. So buses will operate at approximately 50% capacity under this plan, and we'll continue with our enhanced safety protocols in place during transportation. All students and bus drivers are required to wear masks at all times. And if this plan gets adopted, we will be trying to find bus monitors as early as tomorrow morning. Reporting illnesses and addressing vulnerable populations. I want to make something clear. I know that some guidelines were sent out last week from the State Department of Ed about what to look for with regards to symptoms. I have yet to receive clear guidance from the State Department of Ed or the Department of Public Health on what the requirements are to close schools. Neither I, our public health director, have also spoken with our district medical advisor. At this moment, no one knows what the protocol is for us to close school. And I understand parents have that question. If there is a confirmed case in my child's school, what's going to happen? Well, right now, I don't have anything from the state that tells me what I need to do. So if it's left up to me, to be quite honest, if there's a confirmed case, I'm going to close. I'm going to err on the side of caution. Now, that may not be required when the state tells us what these guidelines are going to be. We haven't received them yet. So until I receive that from the state that says if there's, if you have 5 kids who are symptomatic, you have to send everyone home in quarantine, I don't know that answer right now. But when I'm asking parents, and this is going just to the parents at home and staff in a moment, please do not send your children to school if they're exhibiting any symptoms of being sick. Temperatures. I got a lot of trouble at home 2 weeks ago or last week when I outed my wife and I about giving our kids Motrin when they had a borderline temperature. We've all done it. I've done it. I'm sure a lot of you have done it. We can't do that any longer because now it's not the chance of spreading strep throat to a bunch of kids in a classroom. This is something that can ultimately, take someone's life. Any symptoms, coughs, congestion, any other symptoms, I'm imploring parents, please keep your children home. I know it's not convenient. I know you have to work. I understand these are horrible decisions you have to make. But please, please, please do everything you can that if your child is sick, please keep them home. Staff members, I'm talking to you. If you're sick, stay home. There's no more perfect attendance awards for anybody. There's no more patting on the back because you came to work every day. If you are sick or you're showing a symptom, everybody, please stay home. There's more detailed information on what symptoms to look for will be coming. I'm hopeful that I'll get guidance from the state as to what the rules are in the event there is an outbreak in your community or what the numbers are going to be. But I don't have that as of today, and unfortunately, we can't wait any longer to roll this plan out. Face coverings. There's 2 slides, and they all say the same thing. All students, staff, parents, anyone who comes into our school, you are required to wear a mask at all times in any district facility. This is a requirement. It's not a suggestion. I didn't make up this rule, but it's been reiterated to me on numerous occasions from those much higher on the food chain than me at the state level, that this is not a suggestion. If you are going to have school, your students will be wearing masks. If your child cannot wear a mask, now the one exception to that is going to be for some of our special needs students, but we're going to have to require medical documentation for those children. We can, as a district, require you to select the virtual option for this first phase. So if you're not comfortable with your child wearing a mask coming to school for every day, unfortunately, the answer is going to be, then you have to opt into virtual learning. Because at this point, even speaking with our medical advisors, pediatricians are also sending notice out that they're not writing mask notes. And the reason they're not writing mask notes is because this is a public health crisis. And until the state tells us it's safe to be indoors without a mask in a group of people, we have to enforce this. Please, if you are uncomfortable with your child wearing a mask, please choose the opt-out option or the virtual option. That said, we will be providing mask breaks for students throughout the day. Now that we have tents in all of our buildings, There's an increased opportunity for us to get kids outside where it's safe, where they can remove their masks. Look, I've got a pile of masks in here. I wear them all day long. I have a hard time wearing them as well. Guy's 6 feet away from me now. It's the only reason I don't have mine on right this moment. But today I had somebody in my office. I had my mask on. I couldn't wait to get it off. But it's the rule, and it's for everybody's safety. So I implore you, if you can't wear a mask, then please opt to have your child go on a virtual learning platform. This isn't our decision. But until the State Department of Public Health deems it that wearing a mask in school is not required to slow the spread, we are going to be vigilant enforcing this mandate. And again, we will be providing masks for all students and staff, so no one will be forced to go without one. Just like the iPads, everybody's ordering the same things right now. Our masks are ordered. We're told we'll have a delivery date around August 24th. So we're hoping to distribute masks to all kids before they come back to school, because we don't want a kid waiting at a bus stop because they don't happen to have a mask. So we're going to do everything we can to get masks in your hands well before the first day of school. Okay, there's an asterisk next to this because I think everyone needs to realize this can change in a moment. This plan is being presented tonight based on information I have as of today, August 11, 2020. If conditions change, we could be forced to enter into a fully remote option at any moment. I do want to reiterate though, if we are, I was very clear earlier on about why October 16th was so important. That October 6th date is important if we were to go to a hybrid model. If we're forced to go to a fully remote model, the timeline of October 16th would need to be adjusted, because it's possible that the governor would dictate how long we're on distance learning. It might be, based on local health decisions, we may be able to adjust that. So October 16th is the magic date for the hybrid model, not for the remote plan. Survey. I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again. The last thing in the world I want to do is send surveys out to parents and say, well, what model do you like best? Because the all likelihood is most people would put them, give their suggestion, and we're not going to be able to honor that request. So we haven't surveyed parents again until we were able. I'm not comfortable doing it until I can tell parents this is what we're doing. So my hope is that if there is a decision tonight, that first thing tomorrow we're going to send a survey out to parents and ask them what their final decision is and whether they'll be sending their children to school under a hybrid plan. As I said, I recognize how difficult and personal decision this is for everybody, but I want to give families as much information as humanly possible before you make such a monumental decision like this. I'm also, for staff who may be watching tonight, you're going to get a survey from us tomorrow asking you the same question, is that, do you intend to return to work under this plan? I understand that staff have some of the same concerns that parents have. No one knows, no one's been through this before. But we have to get a better handle on who's actually going to come now that we're hopefully going to be telling everybody this is what the plan is. We hear this a lot lately, local control, and it concerns me sometimes. I have been given the authority by the Commissioner of Education to make this decision on my own. However, I'm going to ask the board this evening to formally take a vote on this plan, or a plan of your choosing. We hear local control all the time, and we've heard that a lot over the past few weeks. I understand that I have the right to sort of dictate what plan we start with, but I don't believe that stressing local control actually translates into one person making the decision by himself for everyone. That's not local control to me. That's to just tell us superintendents are making the decision, or tell us, the community's gonna make the decision. So the best way to represent the community are the 9 of you. You've been elected to represent the community of Enfield as board members. And I believe you should be afforded the opportunity to have a say in what this is ultimately going to be, a monumental decision for all of us. So I'm not advocating my responsibility. I just feel that if so much onus is going to be put on, this is a local decision. Local didn't say local, the guy sitting in the chair. Local is, this is what's best for our community. The plan that I presented to you guys tonight, that is my recommendation. And I think it's important for everyone to know that I didn't come to this recommendation lightly. This wasn't a decision that I made by myself. This wasn't something that I made in a vacuum. I've consulted with, I can't tell you how many staff members, our unions, constant communication with our director of public health, our school medical advisor, as well as I know a lot of people have reached out. I try to get back to emails as quickly as I can, but I will tell anyone who sent me an email, although it may have taken me time to respond to you, I do read them and I try to answer every single one I can. But I have heard your input through those who have reached out to me and expressed their opinions on what model they would like to see for their child. So that also played into my decision to make this recommendation. Additionally, I have spent more time with my colleagues throughout the state, but in particular this Hartford region, than I probably have in the previous 3 years, because we believe as a profession, whatever decision we make is going to have a lasting impression on students, and that we have to decide not just as individual superintendents, but speaking for our profession as being a school leader, what's in the best interest of kids. So these are constant dialogues that we're having on a daily, in some case hourly basis. But I just want everyone at home to know is I just didn't wake up today and say, you know what, let's go with the hybrid. That's not what I did. Unfortunately, I'm the one who has to present it, but there are a lot of people behind me who added the input to put me in a position to even make this recommendation. I will share that everyone that I've spoken with that's named here, in particular our Director of Public Health and our school medical advisor, who's been wonderful, have endorsed this plan as a way to reopen. And they fully support, if the board were to adopt this, that this is the best position for Enfield to be in at this time. Just let me be clear on one last thing. There are no good options here. Everyone's going to say, you have a great plan. Well, it's a great plan on a what? It's a great plan. It's like the best of the worst options. The best option is this goes away and we get back to normal. That's not in the cards for us right now. So although I believe strongly that this is the best decision for us, I do want to say that with the understanding that none of these options are great. And I think people need to understand that. All three that are on the table are not great given the information that we know right now. But I do believe that this is the best for Enfield at this time. That said, I will turn it over, Mr. Chairman, to any questions that board members may have for me. If I can get you back on my screen. There you are.
Well, okay, thank you, Mr. Drezik. Do we want to make a motion and then we can discuss it during the motion, or how do we want to, or do you want questions now before we make the motion?
Actually, I apologize. The question and answer slide was premature. Because it's a special meeting, you would have to make a motion and then you can ask questions on the motion. I apologize.
So we moved to number 5 and I entertain someone to make a motion.
I make a motion to open it to questions.
Second.
All right,
Actually, Mr. Chairman, the motion would be to adopt the plan, and then
that's what I thought. So I need a motion to which plan we're going to adopt, and then we can discuss it. Go ahead, Mr. Ryder.
I make a motion to take the superintendent's recommendations to adopt this hybrid plus phasing plan through mid-October.
Motion by Mr. Ryder, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Now we can discuss it with a question and answer session. Why don't we just start? We'll start with Stacy. Go ahead. Ms. Thurston.
Mr. Jessica, I have 2 questions. One, after the students leave on Friday, will they do a deep cleaning over the weekend? Take yourself off mute.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes. So over the weekend, so the crews, one of the recommendations, it's not a requirement in the state guidelines. It's a recommendation that buildings are deep cleaned on Sunday evenings. Those who have ever had to run a school building realize that cleaning crew, building and ground staff don't work on Sundays. So it is recommended that they clean later in the weekend if possible. We're working with B&G staff that way, but the building will be cleaned again after students leave on Friday.
And the other one, where will they put a tent at JFK right now?
So right now, I praise Mark R because Mark R has the site plans for all the buildings, and he's working with the principals to try to find out where an ideal spot would be. And then Mark has volunteered to work with the building inspector, Ray, who has been fantastic, as well as the fire marshals for each of the schools to determine if the space where the principal would like it would actually be feasible for us to do. But that process right now is Mark is just getting the site plans to the principals within the next day or so.
Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
Have divided the students by alpha.
Correct.
Did this provide equivalent grade divisions?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
You've divided the school alphabetically.
Yes.
Does this provide equivalent grade divisions?
Yes. So one of the concerns that, and again, I'm going to be as transparent with this as possible. We looked at, the letter K and the letter L very closely. And what we determined was in some buildings, for instance, the high school, just that one letter shift would drastically increase the amount of kids in which cohort they would be in. So cohort A would be a little lighter, cohort B would be a little heavier. What we're realizing is it doesn't balance district-wide. So there might be an elementary school who their numbers based on, alphabet by last names work out better, more evenly split in one building, or heavier on the B cohort as opposed to the A, but it's the exact opposite in another school. And I had long conversations with staff about this, ultimately where I had to look at the numbers district-wide and split it down the middle. And there's going to be an imbalance in some grades and some classes, but we're doing the best we can to balance those out.
Second, the ERFC has, and some of the individual elementary schools have provided a before school breakfast. Will this be allowed anywhere?
Yes, we're working with our nutrition service staff on how we're going to distribute breakfast with our kids who qualify. They are actually coming up with creative ways, and I hope she's watching, and if she is, I apologize. Claire, I was supposed to send this to you before I went on television, and I didn't, but we just finished before we went live on air, so I'm sorry. I will send it to you later. But yes, I know we are working very closely with Claire, and I'm committed to helping her out as best we can to make sure that all the needs, and her kids are our kids, so whatever we can do to support them. But as I said, that's the only after school or before school program that we can support.
And our food program will be delivering food, whether it's lunch or breakfast, directly to the classroom.
Directly to the classrooms, correct.
I read something from the New York Times that talked about talking to students about what they felt about going back to school. And one student who's a kindergartner in Connecticut replied that she was desperately looking to go to school because they had more toys and they could play. With the distancing, social distancing, and a relatively rigid classroom, she's going to be very disappointed, isn't she?
Probably, yes.
And that's going to be a problem in every classroom, I would think, and an equal problem for the teacher. With students spread throughout a room, the friendly atmosphere that normally is exhibited in all our elementary schools in particular is going to go away. And I would think that could be as much a problem as any of the others we talked about.
It's possible. I think I said this at one of our previous meetings, but I'll reiterate it again. Although whatever plan we decide, and that you guys are going to vote on that, make no mistake, this isn't going to look like school, how we're used to it. It's going to be different. It's going to be half full. You're going to be spread around. You're not going to be able to just grab. I mean, we intentionally hand kids fidget tools to help keep their attention. I probably should have one myself right now. But you can't do that anymore. The rules have changed. So you are right, Ms. Hall, that it's going to look a lot different. The experience is going to be different. We're going to do everything we can to make the experience as comforting, as welcoming, and as prosperous for every one of our kids as we can. But I think everyone understands that it's not going to be like it was on March 10th of this past year.
One last question for me at the moment. You mentioned the various alternate, like music and whatever, and you listed library. How are we going to possibly share library books? Books don't clean up very easily.
They don't clean up. We're going to try to create classroom libraries. They're actually working on that very diligently as we speak. Rotating books, keeping books out that come out of rotation, keeping them isolated for a period of time so they can be disinfected. I don't want to get too much into the weeds because I'll misspeak, but I know that our curriculum department and working with our reading department chair and working with our librarian staff, they are already have things in line to make sure kids have access to books. What's going to change is our kids can't go to the library any longer. That, unfortunately, library is going to be conducted in a classroom.
And they won't be able to pick up any old book they want.
A lot's going to change, Ms. Hall. And again, I take no pleasure in saying this, and I'm not laughing. I'm at this. I think we're all at a point now where what else can we do? Yeah, it's going to be strange, and there's some validity to what you said earlier. Unfortunately, we're not going to know what the effects of the new reality are going to be for kids that experience this until after they've experienced it, and that might be the second piece. What I will share with you, in my professional opinion, we all hope that the virus piece obviously gets contained and gets eradicated sooner rather than later. But the effects of what we're experiencing now, what we have been experiencing for the past 5 months, they are going to be with us for quite some time. And this is not going to be a conversation that ends when a vaccine gets approved. We are going to be dealing with the effects of this for years to come. And I take no pleasure in saying that. But I think we all need to be realistic. Our kids this is a traumatic event for 5,000 kids and 5,000 families. And the one thing they all have in common is they're all coming to school. And we have an obligation to try to help all of them get through this.
Mr. Salazar.
I have, excuse me. I have two questions, Mr. Chair, and one of them is procedural, so I'll ask that second. But the question that I have for Mr. Drasek is regarding the pre-K. You said that you cannot at this point in time make a decision, and you listed the reasons why, and completely on board with that. I think probably part of the reason why you can't make a decision, although you didn't necessarily state that, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's probably the fact that we don't have a decision on this yet, so you don't know what the impact is going to be overall, with the schools and resources, etc. I'm assuming that we are going to be able to make a decision on the recommendation that you're making today. Assuming that is the case, what is the commitment that you can make to those parents of pre-K students as to when they will have the information they need for them to make a decision themselves as to whether they're going to be sending their kids or not? Sure,
and I want to apologize to all the pre-K parents who are watching this, expecting an answer tonight and didn't get one. And I hope I articulated the reasons why we're not in a position to do that. We have to make a decision shortly. We have families that have concerns. We have staff members that don't know what to do at this point. But a lot of that is going to be determined upon what happens this evening with this plan, and then we can better plan for what the next phase is going to be. So it's my hope that by next week, and by say next week loosely, because again, you never know what's going to change, but it's my hope that by the end of next week, we'll have a decision on what Stowe will look like, so that parents can begin planning, so our staff can know where they're going. And I know our staff has been eagerly anticipating what I was going to say with regards to Stowe tonight, and I know they're going to be disappointed in me. But unfortunately, there are so many variables in dealing with that building and that population in that building that we have to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row before I say this is something I'm comfortable putting my name in and asking families and staff to adhere to. So my hope is next week. We can't go much longer because September 8th is coming around the corner. Yep. So I know my point. Yes, no, I'm well aware of the deadline. I don't want to commit to a specific date. And the other challenge is we're not the only ones in that building. We share that building with ECDC. So any decision that we make with regards to our programming, I have to consult with them as well, because that will have an impact on them. So that's why, again, this decision is going to take a little bit more scrutinizing to make sure that we get it right. And they're
Okay, but-
wonderful partners. That's no reflection on ECDC. Karen is the best. I don't feel comfortable making saying this is what we're doing for our programs and you guys deal with it, because it's going to have an impact on their program too. So we need to work together, and Chris and I are going to need to have more discussions about what we do.
So everything being equal, it sounds like you will announce that plan a week from this Friday.
Hopefully sooner, but at worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario. Yeah. Okay. And then the other question that I have, as I told you, Mr. Chair, is procedural. If I wanted to propose a change to the plans that was recommended, what do I need to do that?
Well, spell it out. What would you want to, do you want to amend something?
Well, one of the things that the recommendation, if I understood it correctly, one of the items in the recommendation is that we wait until October 16th, actually the 2nd, to make a decision as to what's going to happen starting on October 20th. I hope I got the dates right.
19th.
On the 19th, sorry, yes. And we talked about how it's important for parents to plan, and we want to give them as much notice as possible so they can be prepared to make the decisions. So the change that I would recommend is that we actually decide now that everything being equal, if we're prevented from doing this because of the governor, then we understand that we have no say in that. But everything being equal, that we make a commitment now to proceed with the hybrid plan, and on October 19th, we go back in person completely. So we don't wait until October 2nd to make a decision on that, but on October 19th, we're ready. We make that commitment that everything being equal, us having no problems, children having no problems at schools, that we know now that on the 19th, we're going to be back in person full time. That is the change, amendment, whatever that I would like to make to the plan.
So Mr. Salazar is asking for an amendment to add that we go back to full-time on October 19th. Is there a second to that amendment?
Second, in that I agree that we should state that subject to conditions remaining, that there's, obviously we still have to review something, but I think that
point
I
of
think
order.
that there needs to be a goal. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Point of order. This second of a motion is just the second of the motion. It does not begin discussion yet. Before that discussion can continue, the original maker of the motion must decide whether or not that's a friendly amendment.
Second.
All right, so you're seconded, Ms. Costa. So now any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
I vote no.
Yeah. We're not voting now. We're discussing the amendment.
Right. Mr. Chairman, to continue my point of order, the appropriate question right now is to ask Mr. Ryder if he considers that a friendly amendment.
I don't. There's too many unknowns, and I like Superintendent Drezik's suggestion of giving the families 2 weeks notice, October 1st or 2nd until October 16th, to decide what we're going to do on Monday the 19th. Right. But I don't think we can predict the future any more than we can tell you what's going to happen tomorrow.
Then that being said, Mr. Chairman, from a procedural standpoint, we now have to debate and vote on the amendment before continuing debate and voting on the main motion.
Okay, so any other discussion on the amendment?
It doesn't make sense. We have been told that what we're just looking at on the 2nd of October is whether conditions are such that we can actually continue with whatever plan we have in place. Not in the conditions will include outside of our school system completely in terms of health and efficacy of the program itself. We cannot absolutely say at any point that we're going to full in-person anytime in the next year, in my opinion, and guarantee it. So to say absolutely that we're going to do it on a specific date is impossible and inappropriate.
Mr. LeBlanc.
So to try to get an understanding of where everybody's at, and with all due respect, if you went with Mr. Salazar's proposal, you could then say, okay, on October 16th, it'll be 5 days a week. And come October 2nd, if circumstances change, you can vote at that meeting to then change the circumstances and vote, no, we're not going 5 days a week at that point. If that
Ms. Thurston.
Tina, you had your hand up. You go first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. LeBlanc. You were
That's
waving
okay.
on the
I've had
right.
my hand up several times.
I'm sorry. You're waving on my right on my screen.
I think that Chris laid it out perfectly. I think we revisit October 2nd. The fall has been the biggest discussion as to what the second wave is going to look like and where you're going to have a second wave. I respect the superintendent's recommendations, and that's what I'm willing to agree to. He thought it out. He's in touch with the State Department. He's in touch with the Department of Public Health. If a change needs to be made, he will communicate that. He's giving us benchmarks of October 2nd and October 16th and October 19th. So I respect his decision, and I will not support that amendment, not at this time.
All right, Mr. Salazar.
Yeah, I just to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. What we're saying currently, or the plan that Mr. Dresek presented currently, states that on October 2nd we will revisit, and then we will decide at that point in time what plan we may pursue beginning on October 19th. The amendment, I guess, to be formal about it, what I'm proposing is that we say now that the circumstances allowing for this to happen, the chosen plan would be to be full-time in person. Of course, if on October 2nd we find out that, hey, we may even be shut down by then at this point in time, and I'm definitely not trying to predict the future. It has nothing to do with attempting to predict the future. This is just giving parents the ability to plan, to understand if everything goes as planned, if the circumstances allow it, we're not going to be discussing what other plan to implement. We will decide now that the in-person plan is the one that we will pursue. I just wanted to add that for clarification, whether that helps or not, but at least I wanted to make sure that that was understood.
Any other discussion? Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Salazar's point, though, so if the amendment is basically to right now just give certainty that we are going to go back to full time on the 19th, but that if, circumstances dictate on the October 2nd or whatever, board meeting, we can say, well, we're going to hold up now. Now we're not going to go back until a certain date. Then quite frankly, it seems like the amendment just turns into a matter of semantics, because the way I'm interpreting Mr. Dresek's plan is that that's exactly what we're going to do anyway. If we would be going back on the 19th, but if by October 2nd, if the situation has changed, then we won't. So, for that reason, I don't really support this amendment either.
Mr. Salazar.
Then maybe I misunderstood Mr. Dresek's plan, because what Mr. Rutledge just stated is that Mr. Dresek said that that's what we would be doing. I didn't understand that as part of the plan. I understood that he said on October 2nd, we will choose from the 4 or 5 different plans that are available to us. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, so the magic and the dates are, obviously we needed to have a stop date we need to give some guidelines on how long this was going to go for a phase of it. So we chose October 16th. That gives us, as I said, time to collect data, gives us more and a better picture on what's going to happen during that vulnerable fall period in the month of September. It also gives us the opportunity to see how well we're doing on this hybrid plan. The reason I chose October 2nd was, I think, as Mr. Rutledge said, maybe I wasn't clear on what my intentions would be. I think ultimately, I think parents understand this. Our goal is to get kids back in school every day, but we just need to make sure that we can do it. A, that we're permitted to do it, and B, that it's safe. So the reason I had chose October 2nd as a day to reassess was that gives us enough time to gather public health data. It gives us enough time to gather experience data on how things are going now that we do have kids back in the school all the time. And at that point, we can reassess, do we need to continue with the hybrid plan based on public health data and experience, or are we in a position now to transition back to full-time, or is that public health data deteriorated that much where we're going to be forced to go into a remote learning plan? I don't think anyone, and I'm just trying to understand a room full of people on a screen. I think everybody agrees that the ultimate end goal is to get kids back in school safely when we can. But I think the reason I had chosen those specific dates were like October 2nd, that will give us the opportunity in the data to be able to come back to the board and say, you know what, based on what we know, we need to continue on this plan, or you know what, things went better than we were told back in August. I think we're in a position where we can go back full time. That will give us the opportunity to present real facts, real data, and have a dialogue on what works best for us at that point. I don't think it's marrying us to one particular plan, and it was actually the contrary of why I wanted to make sure we put an end date on this, is because I didn't want to say we're going to open up on a hybrid plan with no end date, because some may interpret that as being that's indefinite. And I think we want to make sure we have some benchmark so that we can reassess, because ultimately, when it is safe for everybody to go back, that's the most ideal choice. I don't know if that helps at all.
Mr. Ryder.
I just wanted to say to Superintendent Drezick's point, the biggest problem in this spring for parents, and I'll speak for myself personally, with the 2 weeks, is we always kind of thought, oh, 3 Mondays from now, we get to go back, yay. And 3 Mondays from now never happened. So I just don't want to say, to Mr. Salazar's question, I just don't want to say 100% we're back October 19th, that Monday, 5 days a week, A through Z today. I would just rather reassess it 2 weeks out, which still gives families 2 weeks to decide what to do. And that meeting may not be Friday, October 2nd. Maybe we can get together Thursday, October 1st and give people 2 weeks and a day. But I just don't want to say today, when this phase one is over, plan on coming back October 19th, because I just don't want families to have that idea that as a father, and speaking for my spouse as a mom, always thought, oh, don't worry, 2 or 3 Mondays from now, we'll all be back and this will be over. I'd rather just wait and leave it open-ended for October 1st or 2nd to say, here's what's happening 2 weeks from now.
Ms. Costa.
Thanks. I think I speak for everybody when, as Mr. Drezick said, we all agree that the ultimate goal is to have our kids back in school full time, because we all wish this had never happened and they were just going back full time. And probably amongst the 9 of us, we have 9 different opinions upon what the right time is for that to happen, based upon what our beliefs are and whatever. But I think that parents do have the right to know, and I'm going to use an extreme example. If we as a group think that, okay, there's no way we're going back 5 days unless there's a vaccine, 90% of the kids have had it, and 6 months have gone by with no reactions to that vaccine, then it's safe. If that's the case, I think parents need to know that. So to me, this is a way of saying our intent is to go back to school 5 days a week. We intend to do it on October 19th. We're going to look at the data on October 2nd. And if the data doesn't support that, then we're not going to do it. But we think we can do this safely. I also think it aligns nicely with the way the state has reopened. There was always a plan to get everything reopened. There was a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3. And then those phases got revisited as the data came in. And, the whole barbershop thing happened, and the bar thing happened, and the gym thing happened. But there was a plan on this date, we're going to do this. On this date, we're going to do that, barring something unforeseen. I also think that we have to be thinking about the mental health of these children. And the longer we're keeping them out of school or thinking about it or whatever, and I just don't see voting every 4 to 6 weeks or whatever as the right answer. And I guess my last thing is I was kind of hoping, you know, after I stopped and talked to a bunch of high schoolers at the car wash they had, I think they're going to be more inclined to follow the rules, if you will, about the whole mask wearing and everything else. If they think there's an end in sight, and let's face it, getting to that next point is going to be dependent upon everyone in our community, students, faculty, parents, and people who don't have anything to do with the school system, following the continued guidelines of social distancing and mask wearing and everything else. And I just think I support the amendment. Thank you.
Ms. LeBlanc.
Unmute. Okay, I had to unmute. Basically, everything Chris has said, you guys are putting in different words. He said we would be reevaluating. And you know what? We're not going to wait till October 2nd to reevaluate. Chris is going to, and staff, they're going to reevaluate all the time, and they're going to be communicating to us on a daily basis. And I think that everything you guys are saying is exactly what he said. I don't know if you want the wording changed. I don't know if it's semantics. I don't know if it's specifics, but everything you're saying is what I understood when he gave us the presentation. That's just me.
Mr. Rutledge.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question.
All right, so the amendment is to add a end date of October 19th to go to back to full-time, but with the caveat of reassessment. Roll call. Do we need a roll call for the amendment?
Yes, yes.
Roll call, please, for the amendment.
Mr. LeBlanc,
For.
Mr. Salazar,
For.
Mrs. Costa,
You're muted, Wendy.
yes, no.
Sorry.
Mrs. LeBlanc,
No.
Mrs. Hall,
No.
Mrs. Thurston,
God, no.
Mr. Ryder,
No, no.
Mr. Rutledge,
No.
Chairman Krusell,
No's have it, so I'll say yes.
amendment fails, sorry. Amendment fails.
All right, could I make a suggestion? It's October 2nd. Can we move it up to September 29th so it fits with our Board of Ed meeting that's scheduled already for that day?
I mean, the reality is it's going to be based on information's coming in every day. So I put that in just as a guarantee so that the community was watching would know, as Mr. Salazar said lately, there's deadlines. So we can't do it any later than October 2nd. And I just lined that up with a Friday. But I mean, I don't have a problem changing the date. I mean, part of the reason why I wanted to get into October was sometimes you get different data at the end of the month. So I'll let September's data in, so that way we can present that, and it's going to be that week, and it's probably going to be a special meeting, or if we're ready.
That's what I'm saying. We could just have a special meeting October 6th and decide then too.
We can. Well, no, we would. I would. My intention. Again, it's very difficult, and I understand everybody's point. I'd love to be able to say we're coming back October 19th, from hell or high water. I can't say that because none of us know. But what we know is it's going to be a constant reassessment of where we are with not just the public health data, but we'll also have a month of having run a hybrid plan in our buildings and having kids in 2 days a week. And are the cleaning measures being affected? Are people adhering to the social distancing? How are the kids doing with masks? How is the high school reacting? It might be great. I agree. I think some of the high school kids will be fine. The high school kids may get comfortable with it, and then all of a sudden the mask comes off and somebody throws something at somebody. I mean, it's all those things that are going to happen throughout the day that we can't predict at this point. And that's why I'm hesitant to say, let's lock into it at this point. But on the same token, that's the same reason why I put a date on it, because I didn't want this to be open-ended as we're going to do this for the rest of the year. I don't think that's in anyone's. So I will, if we get some data, good or bad, prior to that date, you guys are usually the first to know when you get crazy emails from me at weird hours. I will send it to you guys and say, we need to talk tomorrow. I will do this as quickly as I can because I know it makes everyone's life a lot. But it's just hard to predict what's going to happen.
Okay, any more discussion on the original motion? Ms. LeBlanc.
Chris, thank you for this presentation. It was comprehensive and informative. I just have a couple of questions, and they're not going to be hard questions, I promise this time. So I'm assuming just because of the time, our PE classes, with the exception of weather, we're going to try to hold them all outdoors. I know we're eventually have rain here in Enfield, Connecticut. So I'm assuming in the event that we have rain, they're going to have to do PE in their rooms, but for the most part, they'll be doing outdoors as much as they can.
We're going to get kids outside as much as possible.
Perfect.
Excuse me,
one of
Tina,
the
is this related to the question on the table, or are these your questions for the superintendent?
This is part of the discussion.
We're back to the original hybrid plan without the amendment.
Because the amendment, yeah.
Thank you.
The amendment failed.
Yep. And then we have different events that we offer, and I'm sure we'll get direction from the principal, but I want to put them out there. Freshman orientation, where we allow the incoming 6th graders to go to JFK. We also allow the incoming 3rd graders to go to their new schools. And then of course the kindergarten orientation. I don't know if that's a possibility or what we're looking at right now. But I'm assuming we can wait for further direction from the building principals regarding that.
Yes. So one of the things, and I don't want to get ahead of myself because there's other people I need to consult with before I finalize.
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the things we are talking about is that week where teachers are back, the 31st, without. And again, a lot of it was dependent upon what model we were going to have. If we were going to be totally in person, then it would make more sense to do things in person. Knowing that we have to still keep, the density down, we are having discussions about possibly having some of those activities during that week, so that when staff are in, they'll have an opportunity for their kids to possibly come in and see their teacher, albeit maybe from 10 feet away, but we're outside. Our principals are getting very creative with trying to create the most welcoming comeback for kids as possible.
Right.
The one thing you did spark my memory on something that I didn't mention in the plan because it's more in the details per building, but I want to set everyone's expectations. The normal events that we have, if you look at the phasing of this timeline up till October 16th, there's a lot of events that take place in a school during those times.
Yes.
Scott, turn your camera off. We can't do it. We can't do socials. We can't do open houses.
Yeah, it's part of my list.
I knew that was coming, and it's heartbreaking. Those are the best. Listen, nothing personal. I like hanging out with you guys, but the best part of our jobs, and I'll speak for Andy, is when we get to walk around a building, just pop in and redo a class, or go walk around during an open house and remembering why we do this. We can't even do that anymore. I can't go into a 1st grade and read to them anymore because I'm a contaminant. They don't know where I've been. So those types of events, unfortunately, if this goes through as proposed right now, up until that date, we're going to have to postpone all of those events. Now,
right.
There may be opportunities for us to get kids to the buildings to see things, but doing it in a structured way where we're not contaminating the building. But those are all the things that our principals were waiting for me to tell them, this is what we're doing. Get your plans out.
Okay. And then for the free and reduced lunch kids, if their parents opt out, I think I had brought it up last time, they're still going to have the option. And do they also have the option for breakfast as well?
Yes. So I'm glad you're asking. What thing has changed since the spring? The state was very loose on the free and reduced lunch guidelines, where when we were feeding kids at JFK and at the high school, we didn't have to check anything. We didn't have to check for verification. It was, if somebody shows up, they need a meal, give it to them. Diana's waiting. Right now, they haven't waived that for this coming school year. So if you're going to opt out, but you're on free and reduced lunch, you may have to register the night before to say, okay, this is, I want a meal tomorrow. This is what I'll be there to pick it up. And there'll be a time designated, and we will still be having a place, most likely at the high school, for parents to come in and pick up lunch. And they would, in all likelihood, get, like we did in the spring, get today's lunch and tomorrow's breakfast. But yes, any child who qualifies for free and reduced lunch will still get it. It just will look a little bit different, and we can't be as liberal with handing out to whatever kid shows up, because Diane unfortunately has to keep account and has to show proof that we're actually giving the lunch to the person who is entitled to it, which I like the old way better. If a kid shows up and needs a lunch, give it to him. But
yeah,
I don't make that rule.
Okay. And then my last two things, or I actually have three quick things. As far as the iPads, when those are ready to be distributed, and thank you for giving us an update regarding the cases. I'm basically assuming that we'll get the directive from the building principal.
Yeah. So
and they'll set up allotted times to keep social distancing and.
Yep, I informed the principals today that the distribution for iPads are going to come from the building, because principals know the families, the principals know the kids, and that way, if you get to September 10th and a kid says, "Well, I didn't get one," and Mr. Sills handed it out to him, Mr. Sills will know we gave that iPad out to a kid.
Correct.
And then also will give another opportunity for parents and kids to. I think sometimes there's kids out there that just want to be on school campus, even if it means they can't go in. If they can see staff members just to pick this up. So it's better suited to be distributed that way, as opposed to when we had the mass distribution here at Central Office.
Right. And then as far as the sports go, it's parents are wondering if they opt out, if their kids will still be able to participate in sports. And from what I understand, that directive would come from the CIAC.
Yeah. So if you read one of the addendums or the 3-shot penalty that I explained last time we met, that was actually listed in there that if a student opts out, they can't participate in sports. That was listed as a recommendation in there. We're waiting for further guidance on whether that's mandatory. Some districts are saying they're going to let kids play anyway. Others are saying no. We put some questions back into the state and the CIA saying you need to give us some clear guidelines on what we can do. So there's going to be a universal rule for that, from my understanding, across the state. Leaving that control is a bad idea.
Okay. And lastly, I've gotten 2 questions on this week. I think the parents would love to see what the cleaning plan is going to look like and ventilation. I don't know if that's going to be distributed to the town council or something, but maybe we can get more of an idea of exactly what cleaning is going to be taking place on the school buildings on Wednesdays and on when kids aren't in schools. So you don't have to answer that. That's just something that I wanted to put out there. So that's all I have. Oh, go ahead.
It's in the world of Mark and our B&G guys.
Yes.
They're making sure. They told me you're not going to not open because of this.
Right. No, I have faith as well. Yep. And lastly, I just want to send my condolences to the Bailing family. They're a wonderful family, and Miss Bailing was a wonderful, wonderful lady. That's all I have.
Any other discussion? Mr. LeBlanc.
I think I just want to start by saying that, one, if we're going to start politicizing school as a state, as a town, as a country, we're going to fail. If school is being politicized, we fail everybody. I think that's point one. Point two, if the goal is not to get the kids in school 5 days a week, if that's anybody's mentality, you shouldn't be here right now. I think all of us on this screen want the kids in school 5 days a week. I've heard from way too many parents since we got out of school in March, saying my kids need to be back in school as soon as possible. Therefore, that's where my decisions come from. That's where my heart lies. I think it hurts knowing that, and this sucks saying it, but there's going to be problem X, Y, and Z that still might not be solved 5, 10, 15 years down the road because of this. And if we continue on trying to figure out the perfect solution, we're doing nobody any good, because the perfect solution is not out there. It doesn't exist. So we need to comprehend everything, get together as a board, and stop politicizing stuff and do what it takes to get the kids in school. That being said, I support the hybrid plan. I like the approach. It's smart. It takes into account the safety, the precautions, and gives us guidance on what we need to do to approach a 5-day-a-week schedule. So I thank you for the presentation, Mr. Drezik. I think it is a good approach for our district to go down. My one question to follow up is, what have the other districts around us done as far as dates and whatnot? Are they coming from the same approach as we are?
Some are taking, just clarifying the month of September. At least one or two that I know. Some are going longer. Some are saying through Thanksgiving. It really varies from community to community. Some are saying until further notice, which is something I'm trying to avoid, because as somebody mentioned earlier, and I apologize, I don't remember who it was, one of the highest levels of anxiety we all had in the spring was, okay, they're telling us in 2-week increments, it's going to be over in 2 weeks. Well, this gives us enough time to really have good data to say, okay, the storm has passed. We can try to get back to a better sense of normalcy. Or, you know what, things are worse. Let's start planning for that. But I know surrounding towns are all kind of taking this in a month or so increment. I think some have adjusted because we're moving the start date a little bit, moving the first day of school out to September 8th. We're so much later this year, which gives us that time into, and the other reason is that because of the Columbus Day holiday, that gives us a little bit of extra, that's why I extended it out to that week. So it really varies.
Thank you.
Ms. Costa.
Yes, Jonathan, in partial answer to your question, in the JI yesterday, although to be honest with you, I don't know whether it's true or not, but it was reported that Suffield is doing hybrid for 3 weeks and then going full time. But I just wanted to say, I fully support going back on a hybrid model. However, without criteria that's going to drive a decision as to what we're going to do to go full time, I'm struggling to do other than just support going back as a hybrid. But I really think we need to have some criteria as to what we're going to measure come October 2nd to say, yes, we're going full time, or no, we're not.
It would also be helpful if we had the criteria to know when I got to close. I mean, that's another contributing factor to this mess is, we're all been given the task to come up with how to reopen schools, but none of us, all 169 towns, really know what the criteria is to close schools down. The guidance that I forwarded to you guys when I got last week only tells you what to do if somebody's symptomatic, have they been exposed to a possible person, maybe they should stay home. But what do we do? The criteria, I'll go back to when this whole thing started. We were on a call with the governor on, I think it was March 11th, March 12th, whatever the day is that we closed. Maybe it was the 12th, where the question was raised, what are you guys going to do? Because everybody was kind of teetering on, should we close now? Should we wait? There were no cases in Connecticut at this point. The question was raised, well, what would you do if you had a confirmed case in your town? Town, not school, town. And the answer was universally, well, we would close. So the response was, well, now you have your answer. And then if you notice, everybody got robocalls saying, we're closed Monday, we're closed Monday. In our case, we were closed Friday. Now we're in it. We've been living in it. There are no criteria on when we come back, if there's a confirmed case, not just in your town, but in your school, with a staff member, in a class, nothing as to what is the expectation for us to do, for me to do when it comes to having to either shut down. What do I tell parents if I can't tell them that a kid has it? I'm breaking confidentiality rule. There's a million unanswered questions on what do we do if there is a positive or a symptomatic cluster of kids in our schools. And that's still the frustrating part that we're all awaiting. And it's not just me, it's also our public health officials of just give us the guidelines on what to do if we need to close. And that may help answer some of the questions you guys have about reopening. We get to October 2nd and we didn't experience anything that would have forced us to close. Maybe not just the 9 of you who are hoping making this decision, but the 5,000 parents might have a better, more comfort level to say, you know what, my kid's been back, although it's part-time for 6 weeks. It's been smooth. I've seen it. I felt it. And I'll make the analogy, and I may have shared this with one of you. March 13th, I set a record for getting through the grocery store. I timed it on this thing. I sprinted through the grocery store with my mask and my gloves and the whole thing because everybody was afraid of going to the grocery store, rightfully so. Well, now people aren't as afraid to go into the grocery store. They're wearing their masks, they're taking their precautions, they're used to it. I think the more kids get adjusted and staff get adjusted to, although it's 2 days a week, when we get to that point, if things all remain equally, it might be we may get more participation on a 5-day-a-week plan because we have that experience. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Rutledge.
I'd like to call the question on this.
I have one comment because I haven't commented yet.
Sure.
So
I haven't gone either, so.
Okay,
all right.
well,
I withdraw.
Okay, so two more, Mr. Ryder and then myself.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask Superintendent Drezek, when you showed us on the slide, A to K is 2615, L to Z is 2616, almost identical numbers, which is great. But to follow up from Mrs. Hall's question, do you think in any one building the ratio is more than, say, 55-45? Do you think like it's maybe 51-49, 52-48? But do you think we're any more than 10% one way or the other with the alphabet?
I don't believe it is, but I don't want to commit to that definitively because they're doing the letters as we speak.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about that. Thank you.
But it's not going to be so overwhelming in certain cases, but they're doing the class lists like literally right now.
Gotcha. I just wanted to ask, just so people at home could have a sense for that. It may not be exactly a 50-50 split, but it's as close as we can possibly do, which I appreciate. So for JFK and Enfield High students, you said that they'd be eating in their classrooms as much as possible. So theoretically, if I was to eat lunch in fourth period, would I be eating my lunch where I just ended my third period class before moving on to fifth period? Is that what you're thinking?
It would be in all likelihood, like I'll use the high school for an example, it would be at the end of the day. So whatever your last period of the day would be extended. And I don't want to give away too much because the staff doesn't know this yet, but
oh no, just asking.
It will be planning it out so that way when the kids are in that period, lunch is incorporated in that period, and then you can get this. That may change tomorrow morning when Aaron releases it, so don't.
I apologize to Principal Clark in advance. I was just again asking questions that I've been asked. Some are mine, some have been relayed from the public. I also wanted to let everybody know who's watching that any emails regarding plans or comments that have been sent to us as a board have all been forwarded to the superintendent. To his point earlier, even if he hasn't responded yet to every single one of them, he has read them, even ones that parents felt more comfortable sending to 1 or 9 of us, but not to Superintendent Drezek. We have all been forwarding those to the superintendent and to the assistant superintendent, Mr. Longy. So I wanted to thank both of them for reading everybody's communications to this point. So I thank you both for that. Classroom assignments. Do we know, because I know probably everybody kind of had their classroom assignments set in stone, not set in stone, but set for like the 75% coming back plan. Now that we're changing the alphabet a little bit, do we know when we can let parents know approximately when they'll get their classroom assignments, specifically for like K through 5? Like you're going to get room 10 with Mrs. So-and-so or room 11 with Mr. So-and-so?
They are coordinating the letters as we speak. They're going to notify us here so that we can send them all out from one universal spot. But I don't want to speak on behalf of I was on with all 6 principals today for the elementary level. And they were trying to come up with a date where they thought it would all be done, but they had already started maneuvering some of the pieces anyway, because we've been talking about this. So they're finalizing that. The hope is soon. That's generic enough for you? Because if I give you a date and I'm wrong, I got 6 of them. So I believe
soon works. Soon works. For the folks that have reached out, soon works. Thank you. And Ms. LeBlanc brought this up, and I know we don't know yet, and so we'll rely on our great principals at each building. But I was asked about orientations for the grade levels of kindergarten, grade 3, grade 6, grade 9, kids going into a new building for the first time, assuming that those can't happen as they have in the past, and that's understood. But we'll wait for communications for our building administrators. So thank you for sharing that. I met yesterday with the Eli Whitney principal about some PTO matters for the upcoming school year. One thing I'd asked is if she could send pictures of the classrooms, you know, with those 9 or 10 desks spread out, just so parents could see maybe what those look like. And I also know that earlier in this meeting, you had mentioned something about sample schedules for all grade levels, K2, 3, 5, middle school and high school. Will the families get a chance to see the sample schedules and hopefully a few pictures of classrooms before answering the survey that we hope goes out to families tomorrow?
I don't know if they'll be able to see the schedules. And to be honest, I don't know if we'll be able to send pictures out in time for that because B&G is currently moving desks for us as we speak. So we needed to rearrange desks throughout the district because when we were looking at 5 days a week, I mentioned, the good news is we didn't have to buy any new desks. We found them district-wide. Right. But again, our buildings and ground staff not only identified them and located them, they're moving them for us right now. So I don't know how long it's going to take them to physically set it up. I mean, the other thing that I can share with parents is I don't want to get the impression that there's only going to be 9 desks in each classroom because tomorrow might have 11 kids. So there's still maybe 18 desks in the classroom, but the kids won't be sitting next to each other. That will increase the distance from each other. So I don't want to say that it's going to be an empty class with 9 desks. There's still going to be 18 desks, but there won't be 18 seats in them. And they will be spread around that way. And they'll be far enough apart where when you're in on Monday and Tuesday, you can't touch the desk next to you for the other kid that's coming in Thursday and Friday.
No, that's a very good clarification because I think my perception was that if we only needed 11 desks in room 14, there'd only be 11 desks. But that's better that we know that there'll still be 22. We'll only be sitting in 11. Yep. I also wanted to thank you for clarifying, and I appreciate this, and I know some of our families with children that attend Eagle and ECP and ALP and ASD and ETLA and SOAR classes, the fact that they do have the opportunity based on their class sizes to go 4 days a week and catch up, if you will. I appreciate that you made that clarification and that everybody that takes advantage of those programs by need will have a chance to do that. So thank you for that, all of Enfield Public Schools that made that happen. So I'll be meeting with our great parent volunteers of the PTOs. We'll let everybody know that at least through phase 1, there will not be PTO activities. They also won't need to be in the building for any reason. Like you said, no visitors unless, Timmy forgot his lunch bag, etc. So thank you for that. And just want to make sure I don't miss anything because some things were addressed previously, which I appreciate. Somebody that caught something that I wanted to bring up. I guess my 2 final points. One is we got approximately 3,000 responses out of the 5,231 students in Enfield Public Schools. There's another survey, like Superintendent Dresik said, coming out maybe as soon as tomorrow, if not the following day. But whenever that comes out, getting responses from 60% of the families isn't ideal. So I do hope, and I'll ask the PTOs and I'll ask the 8 people on the Board of Ed who are on Facebook to please, again, like we did a couple of weeks ago, remind families at every opportunity to respond to this survey. Without 100% response, now knowing that this is the plan, A to K, Monday, Tuesday, everybody's home Wednesday, and L to Z, Thursdays and Fridays. Now that this is the plan that we are presenting as a school board, we need 100% response because we need to know who to plan for and to who to count on who's coming. And lastly, I just wanted to wish a speedy recovery to Mrs. Dupuy at Hazardville Memorial School. And we hope you get better soon, and we're thinking about you. Thank you.
Right, Walter, just if I can.
Go ahead, Mr. Dresik.
And Mr. Ryder brought up really quick. He is correct. The next communication that I have to send out that I've been waiting for is I need to send a welcoming communication to our new kindergarten families. But I couldn't do that until I could tell them what kindergarten was going to be. Is it going to be in person every day? Is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be a digital? So that I will just want to say, while we're on camera, we haven't forgotten about you new families. That will be coming out now, assuming whatever happens next here. And I just want, I don't know if I clarified something earlier that when we were talking about opting out and homeschooling. Homeschooling, if you are opting out and staying, you're opting out of this program and going digital, you're still an Enfield Public School student. You still get an iPad. You still can follow on and log in. If you choose to homeschool, that's completely separate. That means you're withdrawing. You're no longer a member of the Enfield Public Schools, which means you're on your own. There's a form to fill out that I have to sign off on, that you attest that you're going to follow a curriculum, but you don't have access to all the same things you would do if you were just opting out of hybrid learning into digital learning. It also means if you're homeschooling, you don't get one of these. And I just want to make sure people understand that, because it is confusing at times. So I appreciate, I thought I mentioned that earlier. I had it on my notes, but I had a different version on the screen.
Thank you.
All right, we had a call to vote, but I just have one comment. And there's about 540 people watching. So why don't the 540 people of you dial this phone number, 860-566-4840. Again, 860-566-4840. That is a number to the governor's office. Until he comes up with how we're going to open, how we're going to close, this is the plan we're going to use right now. Something I said 2 weeks ago. We are deciding how we're opening. I don't want him coming to a 4 o'clock press conference and throwing a monkey wrench into this. So why don't all of you call his office and tell him to give us the plan on how do we close? How do we do this? Just like Mr. Drezek said, this is your opportunity. Make the phone call. Forget the email. Make the phone call. I reiterated the phone number twice. So with that, let's call the vote. Kathy, please roll call.
All right. Mr. LeBlanc,
4.
Mr. Salazar,
4.
Mrs. Costa,
I'm very in favor of a hybrid plan, but with no concrete plan to get back to a 5-day school week, I'm voting against.
Mrs. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Hall,
Well, to be honest, if we're talking about what we would prefer, I would prefer complete distance learning myself, but I do believe this hybrid plan will work. Thank you. Yes.
was that a yes?
Yes.
Mrs. Thurston,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Rutledge,
Yes.
Chairman Cruzel,
Yes, with the caveat, pick up the phone and call the governor.
motion passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion
Moved
to
by
adjourn.
Mr. Salazar, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Any discussion?
I have discussion.
I have a
Yes.
question too. Go ahead, Mr. Rutledge. Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and make this as brief as possible. You know, one comment that was made earlier by Mr. Drezek was that, and I think we'd all agree, we're all hoping at some point to get back to a sense of normalcy, whatever that might be in this day and age. We may very well be looking at the new normal for a very long time. You know, during this time, you know, I think we all know as a board, as a school system, as a community, this has been difficult for everybody. But as a board, I think we've worked together and I think we've accomplished a lot. There were a lot of things we're working on. We're trying to make the school systems better. There may still be some work to do, but we've definitely done a few things. And, you know, when I was reelected last November in the acceptance speech, I made a comment about this being a journey that I hope that we could all take together. But there's one thing about journeys is that at some point, every journey has to come to an end. I've been thinking about this quite a bit over the last several months, talking about it with those closest to me. And effective this evening, I'm tendering my resignation to the Board of Education. An email will be sent to the chairman and to appropriate parties. I want to thank all my colleagues on this board for the spirited debate and for all your time and efforts to the schools, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge, and thank you for your service. Mr. Ryder.
I'm good. I wanted a second. Sorry, second.
Oh, okay. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much, and have a good night.